If your economic policies for Africa, and I am acquainted with some of the programs that you have designed for Africa, if your economic policies for Africa cannot be known because of the existence of authoritarian regimes that refuse to allow freedom of thought and expression, such as the freedom of the press, how can Africa, under the present circumstances, build constitutional, democratic, and economically viable republic? Thank you.
Now let's look at this situation of two questions. Freedom and economic development are interdependent. They're the same thing. What is economic development? Is it having something? Is it cargo cult? Economic development is utilizing the principle of the human mind. Remember, all of this is about humanity and force and so forth. The only power that humanity has lies within that which makes man individually in the image of the Creator. The power of creative reason. The only thing that differentiates man in science from an animal is reason. The power to make scientific and artistic discoveries, to develop man's behavior through these conceptions, these discoveries. The only power and the greatest power in the temporal universe is the power of ideas. Not formulas, not recipes, not force, but ideas. The only reason the human race has survived what it has survived. Ideas. That's the force we use. The power of economy lies entirely in ideas, in scientific and related discoveries, which give man increased power over nature. There is no possibility of development without the expression of the freedom to generate, to transmit, to assimilate, and to practice better ideas. There is no freedom. You can't have freedom in a zero-growth society. You have only dictatorship, the suppression of ideas. Why didn't the Bolshevik system work? Because it didn't have a market? No, bunk. That's a fairy tale. It should be obvious to you. We got a market system and the whole thing is collapsing. Obviously, the lack of a market was not a virtue of the Russian system. They put a market in there, and look what happened. Worse than ever. You got a cold, and they give you cancer. It's not a cure. The failure of the Russian system is called the peasant problem, at least from all the literature I studied for many years on the Russian question. You couldn't get a lot of the Russian population to accept technological progress. And that's the part, in many parts of the world, people don't accept technological progress. They want to go back to the old ways. They don't want to be pushed. You see, it's the great genius of Western civilization that we did solve that problem. That's the gift of Christian civilization, the ability to organize technological progress. No other civilization, no other part of the planet, until we discovered it, was able to do that in the entire history of mankind. That's our gift. It belongs to all humanity. Deliver the gift. Development and freedom are the same thing because they both involve the freedom of ideas for change. Not libertarianism, not the right to change your sex 10 times a day, but the right to use your mind to develop, assimilate, develop, and apply different choices of ideas to improve human practice, morally and physically. That is what economic development is, which requires infrastructure. You're not going to develop a desert by sitting there and having ideas. You must have water. You must build, therefore you must use reason to get yourself water. You require power. You must have power. You must have sanitation. You must have all these other things. So you apply the power of reason with ideas to give your country.
How do we get this message through to the people in Africa when there's no freedom of thought and expression?
Well, that's what I say.
How do we do it?
The problem, the force of events. I'm telling you, I've been through this. I know this. The first time we got into Africa, significantly, was a dear friend of ours, the late Honorable Fred Wills, who was the foreign minister of Guyana. And Fred, we fought a war together with our friends in Peru and other countries, which led into the August 1976 Colombo, Sri Lanka Conference of the Non-Aligned Nations. And the proposal which we had designed, for which we had fought over the preceding several years, prevailed at that conference. The forces of London and New York overthrew every government which played a leading part in supporting that resolution. It overthrew the host government, that of Mrs. Bandanayake, promptly. It overthrew the government of Mrs. Gandhi, promptly, a little later, with help from Moscow. It overthrew the government of Mr. Bhutto, and not only put Mr. Bhutto in prison, but killed him, because he offended them by supporting that policy. It overthrew the government of Peru, the Velasco government, using Kissinger agents in the Peru government. And similarly, the same process has happened in Africa. Every government that got onto this has been crushed. It has been crushed by African forces, which have been hired and which accepted the pay to overthrow a government which moved in the national interest. One of the governments which is now resisting is the government of Sudan. The government of Sudan is marked for extinction by the Church of England, which is leading the pack in the determination to unleash genocide in Sudan, and has so far been unable to secure, even with the help of forces in Egypt, to enable to secure the people who are capable yet of overthrowing the government of Sudan. It is not a problem. We have to understand there's an inner problem in Africa, because they are not well educated, because people who are educated and have power have a tendency to behave like yuppies, to live at the expense of people less fortunate than they are, rather than uplifting them, who would rather be accepted in London and not be executed the way it happened in Congo, when it was Belgian Congo, the time of Lumumba. They'd rather live in safety and have a nest egg in a London bank or a Swiss bank and be tolerated by the metropolitan country. They're not going to fight for their people. And the people themselves who are illiterate and don't know, how are they going to fight? They don't even know it's there. What happens then, as in this situation in South America and elsewhere, and in the United States, and in the British Isles, and on the continent of Europe, and in Russia, and in Eastern Europe, and in China, and elsewhere soon tomorrow, that around this world people are faced with the reality that what has happened cannot continue. And they are looking and will be looking for the ideas. And there are people I know throughout Black Africa who are very well aware of what we're doing and who would respond, who have tried to respond in the past, but they're terrified. And my being in prison didn't give them any courage either. Because they said, look at that fellow. He's the only fellow in the United States who is for this, and they stuck him in prison. He's finished. There's no one to turn to, they said. Well, I'm free. I may be dead tomorrow, but I'm free today. And we know how to win, and we shall win. But we do not have the almighty power to decree when victory will occur. We must do what we should do to bring about victory, and have confidence that the opportunity will be presented to us. We will have the opportunity. Let us be prepared. Let us be persistent. Let us work through frustrations and defeats. Let nothing deter us. We will fight, and we will fight until we win, because that is our duty, and that is our hope, and that will become our victory, whether we live to see it or not.